This is going to be the first in a series of videos that I'm going to attempt to do a drawing from start to finish with you guys as a way to sort of explain how I'm putting together different techniques, where I get ideas from, how do I transfer those ideas that maybe started in a sketchbook or start in a photograph or whatever, how I look at my own previous work and sort of build off of it in series, and just sort of creative things that go into making a work of art from start to finish. So I'm a little nervous about doing this because I tend to work on a lot of pieces all at the same time, because if I get hung up on one, I've got something else to turn to, and there's not as much pressure to make everything, a masterpiece, because I know that if I screw this one up, it's okay, I've got this other one that will carry the day, so to speak. So for me to do this, I'm a little nervous that this may not end up being the best drawing I've ever made, but hopefully we'll learn something along the way. So as you can see, there's not much there yet. Of course, I've established the basic design elements using a technique called silverpoint, and I'll explain that a little bit more in depth later. But basically, it's like drawing with a very, very light pencil. I prepared the paper with a light coat of gesso, and that enables the silver wire to actually leave a mark on the page. So that's what silverpoint is. It's an ancient, well, not ancient, but it's a Renaissance technique before pencils were invented, basically. So a couple artworks that I'm looking at as I'm working on this, because they kind of relate to this piece. I'm going to show you the one on the wall. This is a watercolor piece in which I've established the basic design that's sort of going to be mirrored in the new piece, and it's based off of this grid structure in which the grid is tilted 45 degrees, I guess, or yeah, whatever, so that instead of a square grid, it's sort of diamonds. And that's sort of based off of a quilt pattern that my grandma liked to use. She passed away a number of years ago. But I've got a couple of her quilts, and it's one of my favorite patterns. I like to use a grid a lot. It helps me to divide the space up. It makes the piece feel smaller and more manageable. I've used a grid a lot. Like this one has an underlying grid. That one's got some grid stuff going on. So the grid structure, and then the idea of the different sort of elements at play, different colors and planes. The sky element, I'm definitely going to use that in this next piece. The clouds are actually, that's an ultramarine blue up in here, and then this is actually silver point, the gray of the clouds, and then just the white of the paper showing through. So I'm going to do something similar in the new piece like that. This is actually sort of a bird shape. I know it looks like a cross kind of, but it's an abstracted bird. And in this new piece, there's going to be a more explicit bird shape. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm going at. Here's another piece that's recently been working on with the bird shape and that sort of diamond pattern, quilt sort of pattern. This is also silver point. You can see how shiny it is. It reflects the light really cool. Silver point on panel. This is another piece that's in progress, but dealing with that same motif. Silver point on panel. So anyway, the basic design of this piece has to do with a bird shape, and the bird flew into our window the other day. We have this big window that looks in the backyard, and I heard the thump and I saw the bird fly off, so I know it's okay. I've had a couple deaths in recent years, but this one survived pretty well. But anyway, what was interesting is I looked where he hit the window. He left almost like a bird fingerprint, like, their feathers have a little bit of an oily coating on it that helps protect them and keep them healthy, kind of like our fingerprints, our fingers have a little bit of oil residue on them, right? So when the bird hit the window, he hit it in full flight and left this sort of imprint of himself on the window. It was impossible to photograph, so I just sat down and sketched it like a life-size sketch and tried to get the shape of it, because it was really an interesting shape. And so I took that sketch out of my sketchbook, and then I copied it on the tracing paper, like so, because I wanted to transfer it onto this new piece. I didn't really have a good way to do that. So I traced on tracing paper so that I've got the basic design of it. And then using carbon paper, transfer paper, I transferred that onto another sheet of paper. And then I had this bird outline that I could cut out using a really sharp blade. And so I cut it out on this self-healing mat, using the blade and some curved scissors to get into those tight spots sometimes. And then I've got this stencil, and I can reuse this in many different ways. I can flip it around and do it backwards and mirror image it. I like to do a lot of mirror imaging of things. So yes, I've got this reusable stencil that I could use for this piece and other pieces as well. And so that's traced right in there. And then the other element is this house shape that's also made from a stencil. I've used this in other pieces. And so it kind of repeats and shows up in different works that I've made. Those will go down there. And then up in here, I've got another shape based off of the clouds. And that's also related to some of the cutouts that I made from the negative space off of the bird. And then there's this sort of moon shape made using a compass up in here. So that's the basic design that we're working with. And the first step, of course, is just to get it lightly sketched in. And then I'm going to start developing it in the next part 2 of the videos, okay?